Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Hello, welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host. We're glad to have you back. Hey, if you wouldn't mind doing so when you get a moment, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on any one of your favorite channels. It's, Stitcher, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, you name it. There's probably 30 different channels you can choose from. And while you're out there, visit globalinvestoragent.com because that's the website where we showcase all of the investor agents around the country. These are not typical agents. They're not traditional. They're trained to work with us investors, and they have access to information on every single property and person in the entire United States. No stone left unturned. So they know how to identify the properties, analyze them, negotiate them on and off market. So that's pretty cool. And it doesn't cost you or I a dime. So go ahead and check it out. And if you are an agent, by the way, and you're wondering where you're going to get more business, go to the website. Click on, learn more, and you can participate in this. We'll train you and make sure you're ready to rock and roll. There's no upfront cost either, by the way, for the agent. So, in any case, without further ado, we got a great guest today, Martin Saenz from Sarasota, Florida. That I'm somewhat familiar with that, of course. And Martin, first off, thank you very much for joining us today and spending your precious time. I know you're successful, and we always appreciate you sharing your information with us.
Yeah, Gary. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And by the way, when I first saw your title, I love it. I mean, some people think you either have to go massive or you go passive. Why not go massive and passive? Yeah.
Well, the irony is passive is obviously a tax term. The IRS uses to categorize certain types of income, and there is income that really truly is passive. But when it comes to real estate, everybody, you're still playing an active role. It's just so some people have that think, I just like buying a CD or shares out of a mutual fund. I'm like, well, not really. It's, you got to pay attention to what you're doing. But it's awesome because you can do it from your kitchen table, from the beach, from anywhere. So, hey, if you wouldn't mind, I'm sure you've got a lot to share, and I want to get to that. But would you mind just giving a little bit about your background, and that'll give us some context, and we'll go from there,
Sure. So I, after high school, got my philosophy degree at University of Texas in San Antonio, and found out the business world was not too accepting of a philosophy degree in this day and age, and went on, got my MBA from Drexel University, and a master's in project management from George Washington University. And really my whole thought was to go into the corporate world, either be a consultant or kind of work my way up through middle management. And in 2001, got a corporate job. And what I realized very quickly was two things: that for one, I was no good at it. And for two, the whole large corporation environment was a very bad experience for me. It wasn't positive. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be going into it. And I felt real constraints as a result. And so after only a few years, left corporate America, and my wife and I decided to start our own business.
Okay.
And inspiration was none other than Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And we started, my wife and I started playing the cash flow board game, started reading all the books we could on real estate investing, and went to seminars. And what we found out pretty quickly is that you needed a cash flow revenue stream before really delving into the investor side of real estate. You needed to have some stable, consistent flow of income. And so we decided to open up a federal government contracting company, and as we were in the DC area at the time, and we started buying commercial real estate as a landlord in 2009. And that's kind of our first foray into the world of real estate investing. And what we really found from that is that, it's good to work a small business, and receive lump sums amounts of money when you close out certain projects. And instead of going and squandering that money on, material items or this and that, we rolled it into commercial real estate, residential properties as a landlord, and grew a portfolio of real estate holdings. And that's kind of the start we had into the real estate world.
Cool. Well, you were in a pretty good market too. My dad still lives up in Alexandria, Northern Virginia, and I actually went to high school at Fauquier High School, about an hour and a half hour west of DC. And
gorgeous area.
Oh yeah, it was
Fauquier County.
Yeah, back then it's still horse country, but now it's got a bypass, and the town's probably going to be stagnant from here out. But boy, you talk about horse country. I mean, that's big time horse country. And the thing about the DC market is because of the government and of course the massive growth over the years, it never stops. It just keeps going. If a recession hit the rest of the country, I'm not saying that DC wasn't affected, the Northern Virginia area, but it wasn't. I mean, that market just kept cruising right along.
Yeah, federal employees tend to keep their jobs, whether it's uptime or downtime, and yeah, the whole DC engine is it's alive and well, and so it was a good area, good environment, but there was a great deal of wear and tear. There was a great deal of stress involved in selling to the federal government, as one can imagine, with all the bureaucracy. Yeah. So we sold the company in 2013, and I was kind of there. I had, we kind of cashed out on the sale of the business. We had a portfolio of commercial and residential properties at the time, not too many, about 10 properties at the time. And what I decided to do is just kind of go back out there. I went to local RIA, Real Estate Investors Club. And I ran into a mortgage note investor who offered a training course. And I took the weekend training course, 3-day course, and I was hooked on mortgage note investing. And it really summed up everything that I was wanted to do. To that point, small business ownership can really be a grind. It can really wear on you, making payroll day, every other week. You blink an eye and there's a new invoice that needs to be paid. Money comes in, but then you're, when money goes out with all the invoices paid, you wonder where the money went, kind of thing. And so I wanted something more in line with freedom of time to build that in my life. I wanted more passive income. So I started my journey down seeking passive income in 2013. As a result. Okay.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And by the way, with the government, my first job was I shouldn't say that. My first job was with NASA, but I eventually worked for Unisys. Originally, it was Sperry on government contracts, and this was back in the Reagan years in the 80s. And they called all those government contractors around the Beltway bandits, and because there was so much growth. They couldn't keep track of everything, and contractors were getting in trouble for. I mean, this is large scale. I'm not talking individual people, but executive level. Unfortunately, fraud, timekeeping and all that kind of stuff. And so, in any case, there was just a little bit of paperwork involved whenever we dealt with a government contract. Just a little bit of paperwork.
So, it's generally about half, like literally half of your task load is dealing with the administrative side, the bureaucracy side of things.
Crazy. Yeah. Well, let's jump into the fun stuff. So you're starting to transition, and you mentioned the notes class. So tell us what happened next. In other words, what was how did you make the transition, and what kind of notes were you getting into? And I know investors who do this too. Some will keep some of them, some will sell some of them, some will keep the property. But a little bit of intel there would probably go a long ways, and maybe an example we can get to if we have time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of preface the conversation by saying that I was seeking something more than landlording, because landlording turned out to be a great annuity play. as you're kind of paying down the debt with tenant income. And, over the course of time, you're building that wealth for yourself. But it wasn't meeting my cash flow aspirations. And so I got into mortgage note investing. I took the 3-day seminar, read about 10 books on mortgage note investing. And let me explain what that is, just so from the perspective that I have done it, if you will. So banks originate mortgages, senior and junior lien paper, and they do so with Fannie and Freddie underwriting guidelines. And about 4% of the time, those mortgages that are originated go into default. Something happens in the homeowner's life, such as a health issue or divorce or loss of job. And at that point, homeowner stops making payments. And over a course of time, there are financial institutions that will bundle these non-performing mortgages and sell them off into the secondary mortgage market for a discount. And so there may be 100,000 owed on the, with the homeowner in terms of the principal balance, and the bank will sell that at the time. They would sell that for like 20 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
And so, so I purchased 10 of these types of mortgages, senior lien mortgages on properties in Ohio. And really what I came from the perspective of, I was a landlord, so I understand real estate. I took this seminar, I read these books, so I put out about $240K at the time to buy these 10 senior lien mortgages. And the flaw with that was that just because you understand the real estate side, the physical hard asset of real estate, doesn't mean you understand the nuances of the paper side of the industry. So I kind of learned a lot of lessons in that. Out of the 10 properties, I performed due diligence from the eyes of a real estate investor and not the eyes of a mortgage lender. And so you always get back what you focus on. And so I focused on the property. So I got back in many cases properties that were, sub 100K properties in like Akron, Ohio, and Cleveland, and these kinds of markets. And so, I was able to modify one of them. I was able to get back a deed in lieu on one of the properties, and I'll give you the math on it. So I paid $11,000 for a mortgage that was worth about $100,000. Property was vacant, and got in touch with the homeowner. He had divorced with his wife, wanted to sign the house away in exchange for debt forgiveness. So I made that deal, then took the property back, put about $2,000 into it with back taxes and whatnot, and listed the property with an REO agent, sold it for $36K with $18K down. So I netted about $5K off that, and took back a seller note for $18K over the course of 7 years at, 7% interest rate.
Okay.
So built a cash flow stream. So given that particular resolution out of all the other 9, I kind of saw my pathway forward.
Okay.
And, that as well as the one I did the loan modification for. So what I determined in the mortgage note investing space is you can exit through the property or you can exit through the homeowner. Okay. Those are your 2 options. Property is you're foreclosing, you're getting deed in lieu. Homeowner is they're refinancing you out, you're getting a loan modification or some other type of creative workout.
Okay.
And I realized at that time that I never wanted the property. I didn't want to be a long distance landlord. It can be crummy being a near distance landlord. So I didn't want to be a long distance landlord. And so I wanted to always go for the cash flow stream. And so then I built my model around exiting through the homeowner through loan modifications at the time.
Okay. Now, when you were doing that, were you advising or consulting with the homeowner, like giving them some direction? But was it the homeowner had themselves to do the legwork to actually get a loan modification, or kind of how did that maybe describe that relationship a little bit more, because I think that sounds like that's the critical path right there, you know?
Yeah. So, for one, there's really two critical points in all of it. One is performing the due diligence so you can gain confidence that the homeowner has the ability to make a payment and just isn't making a payment. So that's kind of first thing. Second thing is your approach to asset management in terms of your borrower outreach, where you're making a connection with the homeowner, giving them figuring out where they are currently, giving them options to bring them back on their feet, and creating a loan modification to keep them in their home.
Okay.
And so those two critical points, and what I didn't realize at the time, and I realized years later as I was building out the business, is that the other critical point is sourcing. And this is the point that gets often overlooked, is deal flow creation and building the right relationships with the right hedge funds and note sellers is the most critical point, because if you don't do that, then you're not going to get a steady flow of business. And that's really the only way to elevate yourself from a retail setting into more of an upstream wholesale type environment, if you will.
Okay. All right. So you have, in other words, you have access to, I guess, information related to these folks who are behind, and you can kind of decipher, do a little detective work, and determine, like you said, if someone, if they have the money, they're just not making the payment, versus someone that really, there's no way to work it out. So you choose, you're being more targeted on the front end on your selection. And I can see a lot of note people probably taking whatever they can get because they have two extra strategies. But if you don't want to do the property strategy, keep the property and so forth, and potentially sell it, then helping the people that are there stay, probably a less a neater, cleaner process. You're not getting your hands dirty as much, so to speak. I mean that not just metaphorically, but literally too, because when you take the property, chances are there's going to have to be something done with the property.
Chances, great chances that a great number of things will have to be done with the property. But anytime I took back the property, I always did the minimal amount to turn it around, such as change the locks, do a clean out, and do housekeeping to get the place brought up. And I sold as is. But even with clean out, you could get pictures from a vendor 1,000 miles away, and you don't know if that's, a picture's taken 2 years ago from another property, or if it's the actual property. You just don't know when you're remote like that. And so, there's ways where you lose control over the asset, if you will.
I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for participating in the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Also wanted to let you know that the book Global Investor Agent is officially out in print and in Kindle on Amazon. You can get it by clicking on the link right here. If you are an agent, definitely grab yourself a copy. This book, guys, was not just written by me. I also included 8 other investor agents from around the country. And I didn't just handpick them. I literally opened it up to the entire audience, and it was first come, first serve. So you're going to get feedback from brand new agents all the way up to top 25 team leaders, some on my team, some are not on my team, with valuable insight and instructions and guidance and actual checklists to follow to not just survive but thrive in this market. I know you're looking for that advantage, and this is it. By the way, if you are an investor, grab a copy for your agent. And for everybody, all profits from the sale of the book, Kindle and print, all go to the Healing House Foundation. 100%. Thank you for doing that too, guys. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, interesting. Okay. All right. So now, as far as volume, clearly the business is always going to be up and running. But it seems to me like, based on what's happening in the marketplace today, the prices went up dramatically the last few years. There was the mortgage forbearance for a while during the pandemic, and then Then we have inflation because we were printing too much money, and then now the Fed's raising rates. So it seems like we're heading into an era, a time frame where we may see more of these, and the business may pick up. And is that? I mean, what are your thoughts there? Am I reading things correctly, or I mean, of course, you never know. Something could happen halfway around the world that affects us, and we won't know until it happens. But for most part, the economy tends to repeat itself. The business cycle, the market's going up. It can only go up so far, and it goes back down again. So.
Well, I don't know that we ever kind of cured the situation from the '08 crisis, and we've been printing money well over 10 years, so it's been free money spread into the marketplace for way too long. So we're kind of at an anomaly. I feel like where we're at is uncharted territories that probably will end very poorly, and that's just my doomsday kind of thought on things. But as far as the moratoriums, as far as the CARES Act, the mortgages we buy are not do not fall under the CARES Act. So the CARES Act is for government sponsored mortgages. So Fannie and Freddie backed mortgages. For us, our mortgages are private mortgages. So, but with that said, we want to be conscious of what the practices are, but the moratoriums are pretty much phased out right now, and everything's back to business. What we have found in the past few years is the opposite of what we initially thought when COVID first hit. And that is people actually value where they live more than they used to pre-COVID. And our workouts have increased as a result. So whereas when I was first buying mortgages in 2013, 14, I'd take back the property at least 10% of the time. At least another 10, 15% of the time, the homeowner would file bankruptcy right before the sale date and do things like that. Now we're foreclosing less than 1% on our portfolio, and we have a much larger sample size to kind of back things up than I used to. Yeah. So I don't feel that that's so much an issue. I think that we are headed to see a lot of defaults coming up. But with that said, the question is, will it trickle down to the retail setting? So that's where I've written 4 books on the subject, just so you know. First one being Note Investing Made Easier. It's because I'm really passionate about this industry and kind of in our business practices and kind of what we've been able to accomplish in the marketplace. And I'm always a big proponent of moving upstream. I don't think there's any way you can come out and play at the retail level, but you're going to get squeezed out at some point. You need to move upstream to bigger deal flow. You need to professionalize your operation. You need to scale your team, which means you need to hire, which many people are afraid of doing, in order to really truly be a viable player in our industry, if you will. Yeah,
that's one of it's oldest time itself is the challenge for entrepreneurs is we're creative, innovative, resourceful. We love creating and building, but then you got this beautiful model and somebody's got to run it and manage it, and you got to have employees, and all of a sudden it's like, well, that's no fun.
Yeah.
So I've been down that route before. I've actually sold several of my businesses, and really for that reason. But now I'm much better at focusing on the who, hiring, like a person who's my implementer, and she can read my mind. Because I know how entrepreneurs are. In our mind, it looks perfectly clear. We just say, go do A, but they've got to figure out B through Z on their own. So when you find that person, guys, make sure you hire them.
And you may not always have like the perfect job for them, but then it's best not to lose true talent. When you've met someone that's truly special, and it's important to lock that person in. But I mean, fast forward to today. I mean, we have a few different companies. Overall, we have one company with about 35 million in mortgages, another company with about 30 million in performing mortgages, and about 10 million in commercial real estate assets. So, and we're just getting started. So, what grows or what's required in the mortgage note industry is compliance. It's become very compliance driven. And you almost, whether some people speculate that the big boys actually create regulation through lobbying to squeeze out the little guy or gal. And, however you kind of look at it, you need to be prepared on the paper side to be aware of compliance and to manage that accordingly, because that could really have negative consequences if you don't.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, thank you for sharing that too, by the way. I want to go back to the actual profit center. So someone is, they're behind on their payments. You determine that they probably can work it out, or nowadays you're targeting that audience. You're not really interested in keeping the properties. So what's the process where you make your money? Is it like a consulting fee? Do you actually does the note go in your name temporarily, and then you can touch on that a little, because I know people are curious. Well, what's the actual point in time where how do you make your money, I guess is what I'm saying,
Yeah. So when we buy mortgages in pools. So we don't buy one-offs. Like we bought on Friday $5 million worth of performing mortgages, and so we'll buy pools of these mortgages, and where we make our money is, well, for one, on the non-performing side, when we purchase a mortgage, we assume all the rights and responsibilities of the originating lender. So we have an allonge that transfers the note ownership into our name from whoever, Wells Fargo, PNC, or wherever we're buying from. And then we also have an assignment of mortgage or assignment of deed of trust that transfers that mortgage or deed of trust into our name from the seller. And so we actually become the bank at that point. And how we make our money is making connections with the homeowners and giving them options to help them get back on their feet with payment plans, and creating a loan modification that creates a 20 to 30 year cash flow stream for our company is how we make our money.
Excellent. That helps a lot. When you described the first part of the podcast, you were describing, where you got started, how you got started. You were making that transition. Was there anything you can think of, like a mistake, or maybe something you wouldn't necessarily call it a mistake, but a decision you made? You're, boy, I wish I could do that one over again. Just maybe something. Obviously, you're still here and you don't have as much gray hair as me, so hopefully it wasn't too painful.
I just got a cut. Over the weekend.
You're lucky. You got the sophisticated cyber. Mine tends to come in patches. That's I got the humor,
Oh gosh, yeah. I tell my wife I'm distinguished there, but anyway, yeah. What I would say is the first, and this was a benefit, but also it was a hindrance. It held me back. The first 4 years, I self-funded all my note purchases, and I was a one-person operation. And what it allowed me to do is it allowed me to build systems by which I was comfortable operating. And I found to be proven over time based on results. And so I did everything from sourcing to due diligence to asset management and portfolio management. So in essence, I got my own college degree in mortgage note investing, self-taught. And in 2017, I got it inspired at during time I was at church on a Sunday morning, and I received a spiritual message to share what I know, out there with as many people as I could. And so that's when I wrote Note Investing Made Easier, the first book. Now, in hindsight, it kept me small because I could, even though I'm at, we're at, 70 plus million today in AUM, we could be at 500 million. If I started taking on investor capital, if I started kind of bringing on partners at a much sooner time point. Now we have 24 employees. We have, we're still hiring. We have a full blown operation. But I would say that.
Yeah. Well, I love your attitude and your viewpoint, because you described it it's a learning experience. It's an educational experience, and it is everything in life. I mean, our entire life journey is like one of growth, and in order to grow, you've got to learn. So when things happen, other people might view as a failure or challenge, whatever. Entrepreneurs usually turn it into a growth experience. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I know we're getting short on time here, but I want to give you a chance to talk about, maybe looking back, what's the thing you think of? Well, that was probably one of my critical path great decisions. That one decision was a turning point or something like that. And if you could, and share with people the books you've written, if you have a website people can go to, because I know people are starting to think, they can see themselves doing it, because the way you present yourself, I got to tell you, Martin, it's, I've obviously done a lot of these, but you're a true, authentic, genuine person, and people really they can sense it and they appreciate it. And in order to speak to somebody that's, there may be where you were 10 years ago in this journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Or where I was, in 2004, which was beyond broke and deeply in debt, starting a company, and just the stress levels and all that. So you could go to Amazon and punch my name up, Martin Saenz. You'll see my books. You can go to bqfunds.com, and we have an income fund that pays 9% annually, makes its payments on a monthly basis as a passive income vehicle. We launched that in 2020 as actually just for my partner and I and our friends and family. And we just opened it up to everybody in 2021. So we're the largest investors in our own fund. We opened it up as an evergreen fund to pass it down to our children. So that was kind of the intention. But the thing that really kind of, I think, opened things up for me is that writing the few books, and that's led to a lot of people reaching out to me. And I don't care if you're investing in our fund. To me, I'm at the point, I'm such a fan of education. I'm such a believer that people need financial literacy, that if you reach out to me with any question, I'll be happy to help. So my email is martin@bqfunds.com. And I'm always helping people. I believe the more people you serve, the better off you're going to be in life. And so I actually live to serve. And as a result, have more than what I could ever ask for. I got 4 beautiful children. I got a beautiful wife. I live in Sarasota. I mean, I'm beyond blessed.
Oh, yeah.
And so launching the income fund in 2020 was really, I didn't know it at the time, because we kind of did it for just self-satisfied or self-rewarding reasons. We wanted just an income fund to pass down to our children. But then we started taking on investors, and we realized there's so many people out there starving for passive income that's consistent, stable, and income they don't have to stress over. And so it's allowed us to meet a lot of like-minded people with the same values we have.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And you're absolutely right. One of my favorite teachers was Zig Ziglar, and he said it perfectly. If you just simply help enough other people get what they want, you'll be able to get plenty of what you want. And in my early days, I understood what he was saying, but I didn't internalize it. And it was all about me building the empire. It wasn't until I realized, boy, if I help other people build their empire, my empire is going to grow sort of, organically, naturally. But I like the fact that you had that fund, and that you're right, and that truly is passive. That's, for those of you listening to this, that fund that he subscribed in, BQ Funds, that actually is passive. You don't do it once you sign on the dotted line, provide your investment, you get your return. You don't have to manage anything. You don't have to go visit properties and anything, and you're still involved in the business. And let's face it, 9% is not too shabby, guys. It's pretty good. And by the way, if everybody, please write this down. So Martin's last name, the spelling is Saenz. It's pronounced signs like a street sign with an S at the end, but it's Saenz. And what's the title of the first book you wrote again, Martin?
Sure. It's Note Investing Made Easier. because it's not easy. Sometimes people say note investing made easy. No, there's nothing easy about it if you're going to do it as a business.
Right.
Now, passively, that's another question. A few others are note investing fundamentals and cash flow dojo.
Mhm.
And
Awesome. Well,
but I want to say something, just something that comes to mind just based on what you're saying. And I love your program and I love what you're about. And I think it's so critical in distinguishing between passive income and recurring income. There's a lot of people that have recurring income and are looking for it to be more passive. They, there is a difference between those two.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is, I am an entrepreneur and I love putting myself out there. Some people consider some things that I do risky and aggressive and all that, and that may be true. But what they don't see is the conservative side. I mean, I was a banker for years. It's in my blood. I'm just naturally conservative. So I like to have a balance. I like to have some of my money working passively. I don't have to do anything other than once a week I check it out. That's passive. And other times I'm being aggressive. I'm putting things out there, but I've done enough over the years. Due diligence. I have a formula I call upside potential versus downside risk. Mm-hmm. And the smaller the risk and the greater the potential, the spread, leads to usually good decisions. And you're never going to get all the facts. You're only going to get the information that's available. But hopefully you get enough information you can based on your experience. And so this is what I'm getting at, guys. I'm kind of going on a rabbit hole here. It's actually like a muscle you exercise. You get better at doing these things. You get better at making these decisions. The key is just to start. Just get in the game and say, Coach, throw me the ball, And that's exactly what you did, Martin, all those years ago. Now, it's funny because now we're going on almost 2 decades from 2004. It's hard to believe, like, holy smokes.
Uh-huh.
But any final words of wisdom? I mean, so it's Martin at BQ Funds is your email. Note Investing Made Easier, the book. BQ Funds is the website. But any parting thoughts, or maybe something from your granddad, something like that stuck with you your whole life,
Not so much from my granddad, but this is probably from hard lessons learned. And invest in assets that you have control over in the cash flow. So many people invest for appreciation, and that's a gambler's game. Yeah. Invest in what's real and cash flow that is predictable and ongoing. Whatever asset class you're in, that's what you want to focus on.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I've done both, and I can tell you, Martin's absolutely right. When you focus on the cash flow, that's, and especially when it comes banks, for example, big institutional banks, one of the things that they look at primarily is your cash flow. They really don't care if you say you have $100 million in net worth, because they know what that's like. It could be 10 million today and 100 million tomorrow and back to zero the day after. But cash flow doesn't lie. Cash flow is on paper, and it shows up when you file your reports, and it's easy to track. And so in any case, we should probably have you on again. I think we could probably talk about a lot more. But I want to thank you for being on today, Martin. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say thank you again for sharing your time and your wisdom. It's a valuable asset, and we certainly do appreciate it. And for all the listeners, if you could please leave a really good review for Martin, right, on this one. It's the podcast reviews are what makes the world go around in the world of podcasts. You don't have to pay for it. You can listen to it in your car. And we do it because it's a service to the community. It does help us spread the word and provide education. But those reviews mean everything to us. If you could do that, guys, we really appreciate it. And while you're out there, go to bqfunds.com, check all that out, okay? Go to Amazon and get the book, Notes Investing Made Easier. And while you're online, obviously, please go to the globalinvestoragent.com and learn how you can be part of that business too when you're serving others, and especially if you're an agent, okay? And by the way, for all of you listening who are agents, real estate agents, if you're thinking this might not help in your business, let me tell you, I have agents on my team that deal in notes, and the properties that they do keep, you earn commissions on those from the sales, So this could be an awesome part of your model. I can't. We should probably have a session just on that. But in any case, everybody take care of yourselves. God bless you and your families, and we'll see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.